I'm Larry Weeks, and this is Bounce.
The world has changed so much. How do we once and for all take a deep breath and say marketing is not advertising, marketing is not coercion, marketing is not average stuff for average people? That there's this new thing, modern marketing, which is the active work that matters for people who care. It's essential that we shun the non-believers, that the people who it's not for, the people who it's not resonating with, their feedback is irrelevant. We don't benefit from their feedback. We don't need their feedback. We will be distracted by their feedback, so we ignore them. But then we have to also be clear about who it is for. And if the people who it is for don't like it, don't get involved with it, we did something wrong. I'm arguing that success in the future is to say, what's the smallest number of people who could support me? Can I get by with 1,000 fans who are paying me on average $1,000 a year? If the answer to that is yes, then I say pick the 1,000. So if you want to make this change happen, if you care enough to make this change happen, you will welcome the fear and say, oh, the fear is here. Thanks. Thanks for letting me know I'm onto something. Now I will dance with you, because no one knows how to make the fear go away. But what powerful and brave and connected and effective leaders have done through history is even when the fear is there, they care so much about the change they're trying to make that they make it anyway.
Hello, everyone. This is Larry Weeks, and welcome to another episode of the Bounce Podcast. Very excited to speak with my guest on this episode, Seth Godin. I expected him to be a great interview, and he certainly was. It seems like a waste of time to introduce Seth, so I'll keep it short. Look, just search his name. Seth to Google is Seth Godin. It's not Seth Rogen, Seth Meyers, or any other famous Seth. Seth is the author of 18 best-selling books that have been translated into more than 35 languages. They include perennial classics like Permission Marketing, which was written in 1999, which, by the way, birthed a billion-dollar permission-based email marketing industry. And I credit Seth with companies offering opt-in, opt-out functions. Other books, and probably the book that most of you know him by, was Purple Cow. His thesis about attention being the game and being remarkable is how you play it. There's also the books Linchpin, Tribes, Dip, What to Do When It's Your Turn, and It's Always Your Turn, and many others, as well as his soon-to-be-released new book called This is Marketing. You can't be seen until you learn to see. It's out in November. This was recorded sometime in September, but held till closer to book publication. Seth has written over 7,000 blog posts. He's founded several companies, including Yoyodyne and Squidoo. In 2013, Seth was inducted into the Direct Marketing Hall of Fame. And needless to say, he's very prolific. And I was challenged when he was going to come on from a prep standpoint, because as I was preparing, I was unaware of the new book. And then the day before we chatted, the publisher sent me a draft of the book. And oh my gosh, it was great. I started marketing up and crammed to try to prepare so we could also talk about the book. Look, you don't have to be in business or into marketing to get something from this episode. It's really about how to make things better. As Seth puts it, how to cause a change you'd like to see in the world. To grow your business or launch your project, sure, but mostly to serve people you care about. I think work, business dilemmas usually focus on the tactical. What's step one, and then what's the next step? I think it's also true personally and in relationships. How can I get him or her to do X? What's the technique? I think Seth would argue the answer to just about every question about work and life is really the question, who can you help? Answer all the who, what, where questions that way. Who can I help? What can I help with? Where can I help? And you win. No matter what happens with the business, the campaign, the job interview, we can feel good about ourselves because we tried to help. People start giving you the benefit of the doubt. Mistakes and flubs aren't fatal. So think about this as you listen to Seth. Marketing is change, and Seth says marketers make change happen. And I think it's aspirational and very pragmatic. So without further ado, here's Seth. Seth, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for for coming on. It's a huge honor.
Well, the privilege is mine. I know how hard it is to make a series like this, and it means a lot that you're showing up and doing this work.
So I've been listening to your podcast, reading your books. And it's kind of like Zen in the art of marketing or something. It's philosophical, it's business. And when I first read your stuff, I have some kind of emotional validation. So I agree with that. Then I have a hard time figuring out what to do with it.
It's not that I intended, but it's a common byproduct because we all have to wrestle with our fear.
Please elaborate. What do you mean?
Well, so for 12 to 20 years, people go to school, and in school they're indoctrinated into a mindset in which failure is a bad thing, in which following instructions is a good thing. We invented public school to create compliant factory workers. That's what it's for. And if you're a compliant factory worker, you have a manager who tells you what to do. But that's not what I write about. And that's not the work of marketing. It's not the work of leadership. Those are things where you have a compass, but you don't have a map. There isn't a step-by-step dummy's guide of bullet points that said, do this and it will work. So what I try to do in my writing and my teaching is help people see the world as it is, help them understand a narrative that can move them forward. But then, and this is the key part, realize that the work they're doing might not work. And it is up to them to figure out what to do next. Because I can't tell you what to do next, because if I told you what to do next, then you would just be a compliant factory worker.
It's mostly principles, and then the playground is within the principles that you provide.
Exactly, and that's the only reason it's interesting, right? That the difference between marketing and accounting is that the FASB has made it so there is a right answer to accounting. There is a method, and two world-class accountants should give you exactly the same answer. Two world-class marketers will always give you a different answer because we are dealing with humanity here. We're not dealing with Six Sigma metrics and truth. We're dealing with how do you engage with other human beings to cause a change to happen.
So then I get your book. So this is marketing. This comes out in November. Thank you, by the way. So I read Purple Cow, The Dip. Are they all marketing books?
I think marketing is everything. So at some level, marketing is involved. But Linchpin is about leadership. And I've got books about tribes and books about how we engage with the fear in our head. But yes, marketing is what most of my books are known for.
This book, being a purely marketing book in that sense, is this first time in a long time for this type of?
Well, the permission marketing was 20 years ago.
Oh, permission marketing. I forgot all about permission marketing.
And this is the first real book from a real publisher about marketing that I've done in more than 7 years. And so the idea was the world has changed so much. How do we once and for all take a deep breath and say marketing is not advertising, marketing is not coercion, marketing is not average stuff for average people? That there's this new thing, modern marketing, which is the act of work that matters for people who care. And if you can't do work that matters, you're out of luck. And if you can't find people who care, you're out of luck. But if you can find the people who want to hear from you, who want to go on this journey, who want to make the change you have in mind, and you can do something important for them and with them, then everything is different than it used to be.
To that point, is finding the people the least important thing?
Ideally, the people will find you, because finding people is very expensive. But no, it is not the least important thing. It's one of the most important things, that you can't figure out what you're making until you know who you're making it for. And marketing isn't something we do to people or at people. It's something we do for them. So who is it for is the first question. And then the second question is, what's it for? So this restaurant you're building, or this nonprofit you're building, or this political campaign, or this widget, who's it for and what's it for? If you can't answer those questions, you probably shouldn't start.
I ask that because some of what you write seems to say, don't worry about what people think.
Don't worry about what the wrong people think.
I'm going to get into this because one of your podcasts, I think it was Hitsville. There's a few of them, and you tell me, but there seems to be two or three, maybe three, Hitsville being one, around the idea of the long tail.
Yep.
And the fat part, like Hitsville talks about the fat part, and then you went into long tail, which is fantastic. I just recommend everybody to listen to it. But Is that right? There's like three of them that are kind of using that concept of the long tail. But you seem to say in that the message seemed to be, don't worry about the hits. Do your craft, and then you'll find your tribe of people that are interested in that particular thing. Am I misinterpreting this? Am I in the right direction?
I'm not sure you're misinterpreting it. So the first thing that you alluded to is it's essential that we shun the non-believers, that the people who it's not for, the people who it's not resonating with, their feedback is irrelevant. We don't benefit from their feedback. We don't need their feedback. We will be distracted by their feedback, so we ignore them. But then we have to also be clear about who it is for. And if the people who it is for don't like it, don't get it, don't get involved with it, we did something wrong. And we got to go back to the drawing board and make something for them. Now, the long tail, there's only 20 ideas that I use over and over and over again. The long tail is one of them. And the long tail is the fact that when you give people a choice, they take a choice. That what the internet has done is opened up. How many radio shows were there 25 years ago that were worth listening to? I don't know, 100. Now there's 1 million podcasts. How do we go from 100 to 1 million? Because instead of being limited by FCC spectrum, we're limited by the internet, which is infinity. Which means that if you want to make a podcast for people who love cactus and cats, you can. And almost everyone's going to hate that podcast except for the people who love cactus and cats. And they'll love the podcast because you're living out on the long tail, and that's fine. And when someone like me, who doesn't like cats and couldn't care about cactus, finds your podcast and I say, I hate this, you should ignore me because it's not for me.
Is that where optimization lives? So for example, I do some work with some projects with conversion rate experts. They're in England and they do business building and site optimization for enterprise. So they're doing this kind of CRO work. Where does that live in your marketing model? Is that for the people that have found you then, and let's tweak what we have? Does that make sense?
It does. Here's the deal. Any sufficiently optimized website will become a porn site. Because if at every turn you do the thing that gets the most clicks, if at every turn you do the thing that gets the slipperiest path, that's what you're going to end up with, right? So you run an ad with a promise on it, and if you run an ad on a promise on it with a scantily clad person next to it, the one with naked people will get more clicks, and you just keep going down that path. So we can't optimize to the end. At some point, we have to create tension. At some point, we have to be willing to say, this might not be for you, but if it is for you, click here. Because otherwise, we're not going to end up with the right people in the room. But once the right people are in the room, then yes, we got to get out of our own way. It doesn't make any sense to build a boutique where the door to get in is so heavy that the customer you seek to serve can't even open the door because they'll just walk on by. So we have to make the doors swing open easily. We have to display the product in a way that the people who are looking for the product can find it. But we don't optimize to infinity. So if you think about the brand Supreme, which is one of the fastest growing profitable clothing brands in the US, they sell out of everything they sell every Thursday afternoon, and then it's gone for a week. That's not optimal, right? Optimal would be an infinite selection of exactly what you need, never runs out. But by creating scarcity, they unoptimize. That unoptimization kicks in our humanity, and some people want it more because it's not optimized.
But in a way, it's optimizing for the demand in some way. Speaking of branding, in the world of the voice search and the Echoes and the Google Homes, where do you think this is headed?
What do you think a brand is? What's your definition?
What's my definition of a brand?
Yeah.
I come from way back when, kind of a direct marketing school. So brand to me was kind of a byproduct of doing everything right and selling products.
It's not a logo. A brand is our expectation of the promise that an entity is about to make or has made. So if Nike opened a hotel, you'd have good instincts as to what that hotel would be like because Nike has a brand. It's not their swoosh, it's the promise. So is it possible to build brands? Of course it is. We see them all the time, but we don't build them with advertising. We build them with two things: interaction and horizontal word of mouth. So that someone engages with Airbnb or with Google or with Wikipedia or with Amazon, four multi-billion-dollar enterprises that have run essentially no ads. And then that interaction changes them so much they tell other people. That's how brands are built. There are still brands, they're just not built the old way by yelling to strangers about average stuff for average people.
Well, let's talk about social media. Where does that fit in from a brand standpoint, or just overall in marketing? Are they just primarily tools to execute on the overall principles that you talk about in that book?
Yeah, it does. I spend less than a page on social media in the book because social media is a symptom, it is not a cause. That just like you don't, if you have a background in direct marketing, if you wrote a book about direct marketing in 1985, you might mention telephone conversations, but you wouldn't write chapters about the telephone conversations your fans have with each other. The telephone was the telephone. Gaming Twitter and gaming Facebook to make some metric go up, there's no evidence whatsoever that this actually leads to any positive outcome. And that what marketers have to remember about, and humans have to remember about social media, is if you're using it for free, you're not the customer, you're the product. You're the product of a corporation that's working hard to addict people so that they can sell ads and other interruptions on your behalf or at you. And so I don't use Facebook, I don't use Twitter. I think it is entirely possible to build a footprint that people engage with without spending 4 or 5 hours a day grooming your social media presence. It's better, I think, to create ideas and products that other people want to talk about and let them use whatever medium they want. But the real work of marketing is to stand for something, not to be facile in retweeting. My blog comes out every day on Facebook and on Twitter because people wanted an easier way to consume it. And I use Facebook Live every once in a while as a way to communicate something that I'm already doing. My point is that when I think of the last 15 years, all the experts who've crossed my path, who have been angry or disappointed that I'm not optimizing for Facebook and Twitter, they've spent the last 15 years and they got nothing now because one of those sites changes their algorithm and you disappear because you never stood for anything.
To that point, so Gary Vaynerchuk, he's like, he's everywhere all the time. And I love his stuff, but I'm like, how the heck am I going to do that? Do you recommend that method?
I recommend it for Gary because Gary has a different clock speed than me. And I recommend it for Gary because Gary has 500 employees who do consulting on social media and marketing. So he's living and drinking his own Flavor Aid. The thing is that if I have a Fortune 500 company, I think it's a reasonable expense and insurance policy to have 6 of my employees doing nothing but social media. But most of the people who do marketing in the world don't have 10,000 employees. They're small little enterprises. And my point is, you're not in this to do performance art. You're in this to tell a story that resonates to a small group of people so much that they would miss you if you were gone. And if you can figure out how to carve that out in social media in a way that you're proud of, by all means, go do it. But I don't think it's required.
I like, you have it in the book, and I've heard you mention it elsewhere, the smallest viable market.
Right. That's the biggest idea in the book.
And you've said it in different ways, smallest viable audience or, that type of thing, which is, it's kind of a take on a minimal viable product, right? Or something.
Exactly.
So you argue for targeting the smallest viable audience. Can you elaborate on that or as to why?
So let's go back. Let's go back into because you brought it up, into the lean world. Minimum viable product means don't sit there coming up with the perfect final solution. As soon as you have a solution that is good enough to change someone's life, bring it to the market, learn from that, repeat. That's the idea of the minimum viable product. The idea of the smallest viable audience is this. Instead of saying, I'm going to make something great for everyone, average stuff for average people, which is what we've been taught our whole lives, is what marketers do, right? We're spammers. We're at a singles bar. We're propositioning everybody all the time. That came from the fact that we had efficient factories. Once the factory's up and running, get as many people as you can to buy what you make. I'm arguing that success in the future is to say, what's the smallest number of people who could support me? Can I get by with 1,000 fans who are paying me on average $1,000 a year? If the answer to that is yes, then I say pick the 1,000. You can pick from anybody you want. Make your list of the 1,000. Do something that delights them and only them. Make no compromise whatsoever on what you're doing for them. And instead of finding customers for your stuff, find stuff for your customers, right? And if you can find stuff for your customers, overwhelming those 1,000 people with so much goodness and scarcity and emotion that they can't wait to give you $1,000 each, you win. Not only that, but many of them, because you are so overwhelmingly great at being specific, will tell their friends. And so now you have more than 1,000. And so your competitors who are busy trying to please the masses, who are reading their reviews, who are tweeting everything, who are building a giant following of people that they can spam with noise, they're going to flounder because they're making average stuff, but not you, because you only have 1,000 people you're trying to delight. And because you can make something just for them, you'll do great.
So it kind of argues for going deep versus just wide, right?
Absolutely, for sure.
You have a great story in the book. The book is, honestly, I was like, I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to talk about the other stuff. And then I opened up and just wherever I fell, I was kind of skimming it. I started highlighting and I said to my wife, damn it. This is, I got to talk about this. I got a question about this, about that, about this. So
that's very kind of you. Thank you.
It's all marked up. Anyway, so here's what I like about the smallest viable audience or market is that it kind of takes the pressure off from the hit having to have this huge hit. The closest I can relate to it is at Google, where we would occasionally run into a problem and we would solve it. We'd create some piece of software, tool, or whatever for our problem. And then I would go, wait a minute, how many of me are out there? You know, how many? So it's user innovation. That's how I kind of relate to the small viable market. If I have something I've made for myself, I'm representative of X number of people or some tribe. But outside of that, let's say someone's starting a business, they want to just start their own thing. Is there any direction you can give with that idea of the smallest viable audience or market?
Well, I guess the advice is this.
And if there's no passion of, okay, I love this, or I'm not going to cut a record.
And I think passion is way overrated. I think you need a passion for changing people for the better. I don't think you need a passion for licorice, right? That if you go into the licorice business because you love
like licorice, Seth. Come on.
I know, I do too.
All right.
But that's not a good reason to go into the licorice business. You can have a licorice hobby, but the licorice business isn't about licorice. It's about people who love licorice and the story they tell themselves. So the idea is to understand that mass marketing is over because the internet is not a mass medium. It is a micro medium. It is millions of tiny, tiny micro media all connected to one another. If you treat it like a mass market, you will be disappointed. That's why Procter & Gamble has no clue what to do online, because Tide and Crest and all that other stuff sells to the masses. It's not specific.
By the way, I just wanted to comment because you talk about that in the book about the problems large brands like Ford and Absolute Vodka are having moving online because it's a direct marketing medium. And you just given me some of the reasons for that. Is the problem because the products are so generalized to everyone that they can't find the specific?
Yeah, well, so like if you open up a copy of Dental Town magazine, which is read by 20,000 dentists every month or every week, you will not see an ad in it for razors or toothpaste or shoes because it costs extra to be in dental town because all you get is dentists, right? That's the idea. It's worth paying for if you sell dental amalgam, but not worth paying for if you sell cars. That seems obvious, right? Well, every single ad on the internet is like an ad in dental town. There is no undifferentiated mass spot left on the internet. So therefore, you will always be outbid by somebody who has a specific. There will never be a good place for you to run your general news because we know who everybody is. So back to your idea of this person who wants to start something. First thing, of course, is you shouldn't raise money. You shouldn't go into debt. You want to try to build a business where you have the freedom to make work you're proud of. So we begin with what's the smallest viable audience? What's the smallest group of people that if they heard what I was doing would eagerly buy it from me because I can present something to them, connection or asset or some sort of awareness that they're like, yes, I've been waiting for that. And the example is if you lock yourself out of the car in a parking lot at 11 o'clock at night and a locksmith is standing right there, you're not going to say, nah, I think I'm going to shop around and see if I can find a better locksmith than you. You say to her, here's $20. Thanks for unlocking my car. Because in that moment, it's a gift. You would have paid $50 to get unlocked out of your car. So the opportunity is to find the analogy of that moment times 20. Now you got 20 people who just paid you $20. That's a day's work, right? That the opportunity is to say, in this very complicated world we live in, I will not make something you can buy cheaper on Amazon one click away because people aren't stupid. They'll go buy it on Amazon. It's a click away. So you can't out Amazon. You have to create a product or a service that's scarce, that's handmade, that's connected, that has some element to it that a few people really want it. And from that, you will generate profit, enough profit that you can do it again. And over time, you can build a business that matters.
Let me see if I can apply that to a real world kind of example. And so there's a startup that I know and I'm an advisor for. They are creating or have created a kind of a SaaS product for commercial real estate owners or people who own multiple, sure, franchise properties or what have you. And it was actually an idea from somebody who was in the business, who had the problem. They won some startup contest and what have you, and a team coalesced. And now they're running. And I was trying to figure out with the book and everything you say on how to apply your principles to that kind of business and that model.
Right. So we know who the potential users are, but most of them will not sign up for this software. Why won't they sign up for the software? Even though you can prove it will save them money.
Habit, just doing it the old way.
And that's driven by fear. So when in doubt, when we're looking for why people act or don't act, we look at fear and status. And as soon as the fear of being left behind is greater than the fear of it not working, people will do it. So
say that again. As soon as the
fear of being left behind is greater than the fear of leaping, people will leap. And so if you look at Facebook, almost no one used Facebook the first year. Almost no one used Twitter the first year. The people who used it the first year got pleasure out of going first. They liked the fear. They're like skydivers. But then in tiny circles, like you're at Harvard, and now 8 out of 10 of your friends are on Facebook. So you're saying to yourself, oh, they're talking about me behind my back. I better go see what they're saying. And the fear of being left out was so great, you started using Facebook. And so the opportunity is in a small, tiny circle, and it's not an accident that Facebook started at Harvard. In a small, tiny circle, how do you create insiders and outsiders so that the network ratchet makes it so the insiders keep benefiting, and so the outsiders start feeling left behind? That will create fear on their part that's greater than the fear of leaping, and then they will leap.
And is this where your concept of the whale and the minnow type comes into play, where you're going for the many to find the whale?
When I talk about a whale, I'm talking about the person at Las Vegas who gambles $3 million, right? I'm talking about the super heavy user. And in most, like in the Broadway show, if you ever go to a Broadway show, half the people in the room have seen more than one Broadway show this year. Many of the people in the room have seen 6. So the Broadway producers thought they need to get every tourist in the world to come to a Broadway show. That's crazy. There aren't that many seats. What you need to do is get someone who comes to 7 shows to come see 10 instead. That getting your whales to engage with you more gets back to the smallest viable audience, because when your whales engage with you more, they're also bringing someone with them. They're also getting engaged. So if I had a piece of software like yours, I'd say, instead of getting 100 more property managers to use this a little bit, how do I get the 5 property managers who already love it to put more of their business through this? How do I get them even more engaged?
Delight those, to just really super delight those people.
Exactly. Because then they're going to be sitting at the country club and they're going to talk about how this software saved them $1 million last year. That testimonial makes the person sitting next to them who also owns 8 properties freak out, because now they're being left behind.
You're a storyteller, and let's talk about the stories we tell ourselves and we tell others. First, in a marketing context, you're all about the stories, right? And if we're not telling the good story, people are going to ignore us. This fear and status, and let's just land on fear for now, comes up a lot in your writing. Why?
It's at the heart of how every being, humans included, behaves all the time. So the stories we tell ourselves and status and fear. You go to a meeting at a major corporation, at Google or a publisher or whatever, 5 people come to the meeting, 3 of them don't speak the whole time. They're the junior people. They have told themselves the story that their job is to take notes. They've told themselves the story their job is to learn more before they contribute. They are afraid. They're afraid that if they say something dumb, they will move down in status in the eyes of the people that they need to move up in front of. And they're afraid that if they move down in status, they will be caught out as a fraud, and then they will be fired and they'll never get another job. All of that coalesces in the story they tell themselves about who they are in that moment. Somebody else with the same background as them goes to a meeting and speaks up, asks good questions, doesn't pretend to be an expert, but exerts emotional labor to be a positive contribution in that meeting. He or she is telling themselves a different story about who they are. They are acting with a different kind of status in the world. And so when we think about how human beings engage, it's exactly the same way that dogs engage and rhinoceri. Who gets to eat first? Who gets to drink from the oasis first? Where are you in the pack? All of that is hardwired deep within us, and marketing leverages it, and marketing amplifies it, and marketing creates it, because human beings send each other signals all the time. Is this what the brave people are doing? Is it what the safe people are doing? Does this move me up in status? Does it keep my status the same? Do I want my status to move down because it feels safer to have lower status? So what I'm trying to do, the subtitle of the book, is can't be seen until you learn to see, is I see this everywhere I look. And once you can see it, then your ability to change the world goes way up.
So then real quickly, on a personal level, if people says, well, and for those reasons you mentioned, I'm afraid, I want to do X, but I'm afraid, or I'm too young, or I'm too old, or I'm not smart enough. I'm a failure. I tried something that didn't work. I'm afraid to try again. How would you address those that have those feelings? Or so let's acknowledge, yes, fear's there. I got it. What do I do?
Yeah, I can't make your fear go away, and you can't either. When someone wants to run the Boston Marathon, they don't say to their coach, how do I make the tired go away? I got to mile 22 and I got tired. How do I make it go away? You can't make the tired go away. The tired is part of the deal. And the same thing's true with the fear. So if you want to make this change happen, if you care enough to make this change happen, you will welcome the fear and say, oh, the fear is here. Thanks. Thanks for letting me know I'm onto something. Now I will dance with you. But if you're asking for reassurance that it will all work out, I have none. It will probably not work out. And if you're asking for the method to make the fear go away, I can't, because no one knows how to make the fear go away. But what powerful and brave and connected and effective leaders have done through history is even when the fear is there, they care so much about the change they're trying to make that they make it anyway.
And I think that whole thrust of what is the change you're trying to make is kind of like a theme in your new book.
Yes, exactly.
Which is an interesting take on being a marketer. You know, instead of what's the transaction, the clicks, or you're saying, you're going a little higher, maybe deeper, saying, well, what is the actual change you want to make? And in that regard, do you mean the feelings that people have that buy the product or hire you?
Lots of changes, right? So, we know the change that Google made to our culture. We also know that if you buy a Harley Davidson leather jacket, it might change your self-esteem. We also know that if you take Kung Fu lessons, it might change the way you walk through the world. We know that if you go on the Pritikin diet, you might last 5 or 10 years longer before you have a heart attack. These are all changes. And we can look for changes on the outside. We can look for changes in our internal narrative. We can look for changes in our feelings of sufficiency. You get to pick. And if all you want to do is make more money, well, that's on you. But that's another one of the changes, that people wanted the change enough that they gave you money to make the change happen.
Seth, thank you so much. I've got one more question for you, and that's, since Purple Cow, or let's just say in the last 20 years, what have you changed your mind about, if anything? And if you were to update Purple Cow, would you?
Well, I could update Purple Cow every day, and that's why I haven't, because it's not a magazine. It's a book I wrote on a particular day. The biggest economic thing I was wrong about was I thought the World Wide Web wasn't going to work because it didn't have a business model. And so that cost me $1 billion.
But you sold to Yahoo. You were in.
Well, that was
early.
After that mistake. I mean, I started an internet company in 1991, right? But my internet company was an email company. We were there before the World Wide Web. So I believed in email, and I believed in Prodigy and AOL and CompuServe. And when there was some flakes using the World Wide Web, I was like, that's never going to work. So that was something I've changed my mind about. But the other thing I changed my mind about was I was pretty optimistic that marketers would take a long view, stop being so narcissistic, stop spamming so much, and do work they were proud of. And I was wrong. That there's always another wave of people willing to steal our attention, break our trust, and selfishly try to clear the table. What I am right about is that never lasts. And so I maintain my optimism in human nature that if you want to build something for the long run, it helps to act like a human, not like a selfish person.
Seth, thank you. That's great. You're obviously just somebody Google Seth. You guys know he's everywhere, but your podcast is called Akimbo. Is there anything else that we should tell the audience that you're doing?
This is great. I really appreciate it. If you go to Seth.blog, you can see updates about what I'm up to, and we'd love to engage with you if there's a course or something that works. But thanks for giving me a chance to talk about this stuff. It was a pleasure.
Seth, thank you so much for coming on and talking.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, that is all the time we have today. Please spread the word if you enjoyed the episode. Leave us a review on iTunes and share it with your friends on your favorite social platforms. Big thank you to Sam Williams, my audio guy. Make sure you visit LarryWeeks.com for all my content, and we will talk again soon.